Welcome to the Grow People podcast. You didn't say welcome.
I like to change it up, you know? Like
He's wild that
Yeah.
way. That is Pastor Jason.
You never know when I'm going to say it.
Say it now.
Welcome.
That's Pastor Jason, lead pastor of Revolution
Welcome.
Church. I am David Stein.
Welcome.
Discipleship pastor. The purpose of the Grow People podcast is to help
Grow people.
Grow people.
Okay.
Oh.
There's another voice.
It's another voice
Special guest.
for all you watching on video.
I got a text from somebody so excited because they knew that today was recording day.
Mm-hmm.
We record every 2 weeks, give or take. And they were excited. They were excited, and all I responded with was special guest. This special guest, timing is perfect, as Pastor Jason just preached Ezra chapter 7 this past weekend, spoke about the difference between discipleship and leadership. So please welcome from the great country of Texas.
That's right.
Our new leadership and missional development pastor, Jesse Spradley.
We clapping.
Yeah, we are. We are.
Welcome.
Yeah. Even though I couldn't say your name at the 11:15, which is the one that you were in. Like,
I threw you off.
yeah.
First, you and Pastor Matt have just been such a light, and you have brought so much refreshment to this place, and to me personally as a friend. So
Yeah.
thank you.
I've really appreciated all the Gatorade that y'all have brought, all the refreshments and all the.
The liquid IVs.
So let's get to know Jesse. Let's get to know Pastor Jesse. You have lived everywhere. Texas, Honduras. You were a missionary in Honduras for 4 years. You lived in somewhere else,
Costa Rica.
What do you think of Georgia?
I love Georgia. It is very different than I expected because all I'd ever known of Georgia was Atlanta.
Mhm.
And North Georgia is beautiful.
What has surprised you about living here?
The amount of people from the north here,
Yes.
from Pennsylvania and New York.
Praise.
I did not expect that at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially when going to visit you, and there's literally on both sides of you, there's someone both from Pennsylvania.
Yeah. It's better here.
Well, the joke used to, be like everybody in Atlanta is not from Atlanta, because obviously Atlanta, not just with the Olympics in the 90s, but it came on, the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And so, yeah, there's so many people in Atlanta not from Atlanta, but obviously as Atlanta has grown, now even Canton and Jasper. And so there's a lot of people here from the north. Yeah.
Do you have any favorite things like you have, like in your few short months here? You're like, oh, I love this about Georgia.
It's one thing. It's the weather. That's it.
Yeah.
The people are great. Everything's great, but the weather.
So explain the difference, because people who live here are like, hey, if you don't like the weather in Georgia, wait 3 hours, it'll change. But compared to San Antonio,
I feel like everybody says that.
Everybody,
unless you're in a
state.
desert. Like, yeah.
Every state.
We said that in Texas
Yep,
too.
we did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When I lived in Colorado for a while, they said that.
They said the same thing.
well,
Yeah.
what's the climate in San Antonio that you hate?
Hot.
You hated.
Hot at all times. I will
Okay.
say this year was the first year in probably 15 years that I was not wearing shorts and a tank top for Christmas.
Yeah.
It's hot year round.
If you're not watching this, he's wearing shorts and a tank top now, which is uncomfortable. The tank top is tucked in.
Yeah.
Jesse moved here.
Please don't tell me. We didn't ask that in the interview. You don't tuck in a tank top, do you? Yeah. Okay. If we do, then you might be moving from North Georgia.
You moved here first by yourself. You were going back and forth,
Yeah.
back and forth. Full disclosure: stayed at my house. You survived pretzel.
I did.
And pickles at one point.
Yep.
Yeah, you had them both. You got awfully quiet when I mentioned pretzel. You bonded?
We did bond.
Yeah,
He became my friend.
he did.
Yeah.
He did. And then you went back and you got Mrs. Spradley and the young Spradleys, Hudson and Lucy, who I have never not seen smile. Are they always smiling?
It's how they are here is exactly how they are.
They're an absolute joy. Absolute joy. What do they like about Georgia?
Hudson would say the weather as well.
Mhm.
Very much saying the weather, but
Mhm.
his number one thing is the church.
Mm.
That's his favorite thing.
Oh, he is plugged in.
Oh,
That's
he's-
awesome.
He's in.
Yeah. And is inspiring for 14?
15. You
15.
15 last week.
15. Inspiring to everybody he's around because his joy for the church, joy for the local church, joy for Jesus is contagious. And I feel it when I'm around him.
Yeah.
People can't hear you nod.
Yeah, they can't hear me.
Just want to let you know that.
Hey, I am
radio.
nodding right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
What don't you like about living here?
You know, that is a great question. San Antonio has one specific thing that I
Come on now.
miss
I know where you're going with this.
desperately.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is something that you eat in the morning, at lunch, at 2 a.m.
Yep.
And it is called a breakfast taco.
That's right.
I have heard about such things.
And I have searched within a 15-mile, 20-mile radius of where we live and have not found one yet. And so if anyone out there knows where a great breakfast taco is, please let me know.
Is there another name for the breakfast taco? Maybe people know it as something else. Is it a burrito? Is it
No. That's a California thing. They have their burritos.
Breakfast
out there.
burritos,
Breakfast
yeah.
burritos in California.
Uh-huh.
But it is a breakfast taco.
Yeah, breakfast taco though could the only difference is if you fold it all the way over. You know what I mean? Like it could classify still as a burrito, but it's open on the ends.
It is.
Okay,
There you
yes.
go.
What do we get at that place at the airport? They're not that great, but
That's a
it's-
breakfast taco.
Okay, that's a breakfast taco.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
At El Taco, I think is the name
Okay.
in Terminal C.
All right.
Yeah, it's a breakfast taco.
Okay, and
Yeah,
there's-
it's a
there's-
flour tortilla, a flour tortilla, eggs, bacon,
Okay.
pico,
Yeah.
guacamole,
All right.
cheese,
And
depending
my
on what else you.
favorite is a breakfast taco with bean and chorizo.
Yes,
It's just
it's amazing.
the greasiest, messiest, most delicious thing.
I've got to
Yeah.
find out if El Don is open for breakfast. I've only been to El Don.
I
during
don't
the
think
day.
they have breakfast tacos.
So there's two things. There's no restaurants open before 7 a.m. for a breakfast taco.
Yeah,
And then there's nothing open past 10 p.m.
Oh, that is a problem.
yeah,
Yes.
especially here in Canton. Yeah.
There's nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah,
10 p.m. shut down.
Yeah.
maybe Taco Mac. Would you say or yeah,
Yeah, I think they're open later.
yeah,
Yeah. People are yelling Waffle House. Yeah, we get that.
yeah.
But
And Waffle House is fantastic.
it would love it.
Yeah,
Here's my theory on Waffle House. Thank you for asking. It's always great, and it's always a mistake. I've never gone there where I had a bad meal, and I've never gone there where a half hour later I don't go,
yeah,
there were other choices.
yeah.
See, I'm just going to sit here and be quiet because my mom taught me to. If you didn't have anything nice to say, don't.
They'll
No,
say
say it.
Yeah.
They can't.
I can't.
People can't.
You know,
pe-
Georgia is the home of Waffle
I
House, so you
know.
do have to be careful.
They
Yeah.
They can't hear you nodding, and they can't see your disdain.
That's right. When I was growing up in Texas, I'm from Alabama, and so everyone in Alabama, they love Waffle House.
Yeah.
My granddad loves Waffle House. So the first thing we did when we came to Alabama to visit my grandparents, my granddad took us to Waffle House.
Yeah.
And I remember walking in the floor, and I remember it clearly. My shoes sticking to the floor,
Yeah.
clearly, and
Yeah.
it's not any different here.
And
That's part of the charm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
I remember
Leave with a souvenir.
my first
Yeah.
Waffle House. They didn't have them in Pennsylvania at the time. They may now. I have no idea. But going to the Masters the first time in 1997, driving 14 hours to get here, and then going to a Waffle House, and the guy making my food took my order and was smoking a cigarette at the time. I said, I love this place.
That's the exact reason why Jesse hates it.
I was there a couple of weeks ago with
Yeah.
someone, and I'm sitting right in front of the grill, and the guy cooking is the manager of the place at the time, and he's stirring it with one hand and has a big sandwich in the other and eating at the same exact time. And I was just like, this is not the place for me. I don't know.
You would prefer not to watch them make your food.
Yes.
Just assume that it's all good in the back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't want to see it.
All right.
Now you do need to go to Keithsburg Cafe. If you haven't been, I'll take you there.
What?
That's the best breakfast around
Yes.
here. It's off exit 20, Highway 5, old school, like local place. Hard to get into, very small. But the best the best pancake, eggs, sausage.
Yeah.
And it's I don't want to say it's like Waffle House because I don't want to be offensive to.
It's a greasy spoon.
It's that kind of place, but like cooked on a griddle type of place. But in the back, just an old school Canton place, and I'm talking about like the best breakfast.
Yes.
Go.
Yeah, the
Let's
best
go.
breakfast.
Yeah. I'm very hungry now.
Yes.
I want to flash back 2 podcasts ago when we talked about my tendency to roll down a window when I get into the car.
You know, I was hoping you would do that.
Jesse was involved in that
He was sitting back seat with you.
attack on me.
We like to call it an intervention.
I was about to intervention. It's an intervention.
It was.
It was an unplanned,
Because
unscheduled intervention.
Let me tell you this. When
Okay.
this happened,
Okay.
I first met you,
Uh-huh.
and we get in your car
Yeah.
from your house to go somewhere.
Yeah.
I think
When you were going back and forth.
when I was flying back and forth.
Yeah.
Guest in my house.
Guest
Yeah.
in your house.
Yes.
And your car.
And in your car. We get in the car. We're driving down the road, not even 5 minutes, and you crack the window.
Uh-huh.
Like just a couple inches.
Right.
And I was self-conscious. First of all, my thought was the road noise is like unbearable. The
Yeah.
wah, 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 wah.
Yeah.
But then I was like, do I smell bad? Like I immediately thought I stink. So he rolled down the window. And I was like, and then I figured out that wasn't the case.
No.
But you constantly have to roll down your window at the same time. So
Yeah.
it's not the wah, wah, wah sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He likes wah wah.
I do like it.
Yeah,
I
he
do
does
like
like wah, wah.
I do like the Wawa. Yeah, I had no idea that it was so offensive. And 60,
Not offensive.
Well, it sounded like you were offended.
I mean, a little bit.
You know, 63 years, nobody was caring enough to tell me, hey, when you put your window down, it's annoying.
Yeah.
So,
I wouldn't even say annoying. Like it's more of, it's painful.
That's
you know what I
the
mean?
thing.
Because of the pressure.
you see,
You know.
I don't notice that.
Yeah.
But now I put my window down and then I put the back window down.
Yes.
So I do that,
Yeah.
considering others more
that's-
significant.
That's right.
Yes,
Yeah. Relieve
yes.
the pressure.
But man, the number of people that have walked through this church on a Sunday, they go, "Hey, is your window down?"
That's the bad thing about revealing things.
It's okay.
In a sermon or a podcast.
Then I know they're listening.
Yeah.
So, if we want some data on how many people are listening, we don't go to analytics.
No.
We just walk through the lobby.
Well, that was the funniest thing because I think we said it on that podcast, but we were in Chad's Suburban and the two of you were in the back seat, and unbeknownst to Jesse or probably anybody else, I orchestrated you sitting in the back seat because you can't roll those windows down.
You cannot.
And so we
No.
were going down 575, and I think you requested
Yes.
to crack a window.
Yes.
Yes.
Because I was dying back. And it's never a fresh air thing. Well, no, it is a fresh air thing. I'm just
Yeah.
hot,
Yeah.
you know. So
So then when you requested, and then that whole spiel happened, and then Jesse just thought he was suffering in silence.
I did. I really did.
he was relentless.
Yeah, but to know that other people had felt
You were the one that
I
said,
was not
Matt-
alone.
Yes.
In
You
my
were-
suffering.
You were
Yeah.
the one that said the audacity. Okay, so this all comes together, and what you're hearing is, we're all friends.
Yeah.
and that is not normal.
Yeah.
Especially in church, right? I mean, you've
yeah.
come from many different churches. When I came back in November, and Pastor Jason, we had a team member event, and you announced that I was coming back from a leave of absence, and you introduced Jesse and Matt, and then we left for a pastor's retreat that day. So we didn't know you guys. Obviously, through the vetting process, we found out y'all weren't crazy, or at least too crazy. And we went away for 3 days, and it was seamless. It was as if we had been together for 10 years. And I don't know, Jason, have you ever seen that kind of transition with staff happen like that before at that level?
I mean, other than Jesse making fun of Texas Longhorns too much, no.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the only part that.
He's still sore about that. He is still sore about that.
No, but I say that I mentioned that to say because Jesse, when guys like, I know ladies don't always understand this, but when guys like each other, we will mess with each other. But on that retreat, Jesse jumped right in and was messing with me. I was like, all right, cool that one just a little bit. But no, it was great, man. And they both have been awesome and jumped right in.
So you have this long title, Leadership and missional development pastor.
Yes, sir.
Does anybody ever say, "What do you do"?
Every Sunday, probably.
Every Sunday.
At least every Sunday.
Yes. Yeah, and the same thing. What does the discipleship pastor do? So, talk about your pathway to becoming a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your passion for leadership. So we'll get into all this stuff, but I wanted to start out first. Pastor Jason, you described the difference between discipleship and leadership. We did that a lot in the Abide cohort, but I think it's important that we revisit it all the time, especially because every single person is a disciple.
Yeah, it was interesting, like looking in Ezra 7, like, we first find out who Ezra is. He comes onto the scene, and then the king tells him to appoint leaders. And then it's kind of wonky in how it reads in the English, but basically he says, appoint leaders who know the law of your God. And then if they don't know it, teach it to them. So it's not like the king was using the same categories that we use, but the principle is there of, like, you don't need to appoint people in leadership who don't know the law, who don't obey the law, And so then you think about that from Jesus telling us to go into all the nations and make disciples and teaching them to obey. And as we've talked about, that discipleship at the end of the day is about obedience to Jesus, So therefore, you could say you don't need to appoint anybody to leadership who isn't first a disciple, because they don't know the law and they're not obeying the law. So it just kind of jumped out at me from that perspective. And we didn't talk about it prior to the message, because, I'm studying that week and preaching it. And then, but I was like, oh, this is something cool, really cool that Jesse could use in the future, and we could use in the future to, like, show an example of, like, this is why this is important, because, yeah, if I have a leadership skill to do so, like God's gifted me to, whether it's speak or administrate or whatever, at the core of whether or not I'm going to be good at that is not just my skill, it's my character.
Right.
If I'm a disciple who obeys Jesus. So as we've talked about, like, discipleship is the core of leadership. So not every disciple is going to be a leader at the same level. That depends upon gifting, but every leader should be a disciple,
Yeah.
So it was just one of those things that, like, going into studying chapter 7, I hadn't thought about. And then as I was studying it, and even in the message, I was like, this is kind of like a side note to the main point of what I'm talking about. But it rings true.
Yeah.
Again, like the whole idea of, like, God's hand being on us, being helped, our hearts being set on him. It's like the best thing I can do for my leadership, and anybody that can do for their own leadership, is first set their heart on God, like obey God, develop the heart. I don't know, and you might know this, but I think it was Ken Blanchard. I'm not sure. But I think so. He talks a lot about heart, hands, and head of leadership, so that heart piece is that discipleship piece. Like, it's not just developing your head, your knowledge, or your hands, your skills, but it's your heart, so it's being a disciple first.
So you're following Jesus. What came first, the mission field or becoming a pastor?
Becoming a pastor.
And what led to that?
Yeah, I felt called to ministry at a young age, and just started interning at churches early on in college, and then was interning in a church and offered a full-time job at the church as a children's worship pastor. I was basically, we did first-time guest visitations every Sunday or every week after church, and it was always two pastors that would go and
like in person.
Oh,
like to somebody's house,
to someone's house.
It's old school.
Yeah.
And it's a big church too. So we split it up and did it every week, two pastors together, and went and.
Those listening don't get any ideas.
Well, probably people are like, I don't want you to show up at my house. Yeah.
People don't now. People hide. That's what they have the Ring cameras for.
True.
But we would go, and every single time they would introduce me as, this is Jesse. He's our children's worship dance pastor.
Oh, gosh.
And, it got a little old after a while, but I did. I worshiped through dance with the kids every week. But that's where it started as a pastor there.
And at what point, how many years in did you say, hey, let's go to Honduras?
That was, I think, probably 9 years. 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
9 years in. Then my wife and I, Liz, would always talk about mission work and going on the mission field. But it wasn't until I was going back and forth a lot, leading teams, student teams, adult teams, that my wife and I were just like, we should do this. So we did.
And did you meet Liz at church?
We did.
Like, because she was on staff there too, right?
We were both on
Yeah.
staff at the church. We met, and then within, I think, a month, we both came on staff
Yeah.
at the church
Yeah.
together.
Okay, we're going to fast forward, but then we're going to flash back.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
like a
I like where we're going here.
sitcom here.
Okay, so let's go back to July, August, September.
Of last year?
Of last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interviewing for a campus pastor to take over for my role
Yeah.
as I move into discipleship. And you get two guys that are looking for the same gig. But what happened in your interview with Pastor Jesse?
Yeah, it was quite interesting. Like, like any job, you get a bunch of candidates and you look at them. And actually, Chad was like, I do not like this Jesse guy. And no, I'm just joking.
That is not what he said.
Chad, I'm coming for
No,
you.
Chad did the first kind of round of interviews. It was like, hey, here's 4 or 5 guys, and so I look at them, and then it's like, these are the ones, we're going to have meetings with. And so we do, and I don't remember, I think we met with Matt before you.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. Cause Matt was local, and so really liked Matt. And again, which is funny because you kind of have an ideal profile of what you're looking for in a campus pastor. And there were certain characteristics that we had that Jesse had that we were actually looking for in the campus pastor. Not that Matt didn't have them, but like the software we use, it matches people based upon just testing,
Sure.
But data is, those kind of tests are good, but you got to meet the person, so we're looking at them. And so there was definitely characteristics that Jesse had that were like, this would be a really great fit. But then we meet Matt, we're like, yeah, but Matt is really a lot like David, like in your mold, just certain characteristics wise. And I just remember telling Chad, I'm like, dude, like, I feel like Matt for our church in this season, like following Dave, because following you is going to be tough, in a great way, because you leave such a big relational hole, or you have a big relational wake, you're connected to a lot of people. So that was going to be really tough. So to like take a right turn from your personality to somebody else would be very tough, So Chad and I talked about that, and I was like, man, I think for this situation, like Matt is in a much better David mold, and so what if we hired Matt for the campus pastor, but then we talked to Jesse about doing this other role, like leadership development, even though Jesse's got great skills to do this role too. Like it might be too much of a change to go from David to Jesse, in that specific role. So I told Chad, I was like, I know Jesse's coming here to interview for the campus pastor role, but like, what if we just try to convince him to take this other role?
Which was definitely the weirdest interview I've been.
It was super weird. And so, we didn't want to do a bait and switch. Like I didn't want to so now that I know Jesse, I know he appreciates just being up front. And so we talked a little bit, and then and Jesse obviously had no idea of the context of what we were talking about, and I was like, I saw you were a missionary. What do you like about that? Would you want to be a missions pastor? And he was like, no, I would not want to do that. Well, I saw that you really because you had posted like on your Instagram and stuff. Like I knew that you liked leadership development. And I was like, well, what about this? And so basically it was like an hour and a half or 2 hours of me, like not trying to convince you, but show you why I think this actually could be like a much better role for you than the campus pastor role. Just given our unique situation.
And it is.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm glad that you saw it that way.
It was weird at first. I was
it was
all these
definitely
questions that really didn't pertain to a campus pastor at all. So I was just, what's happening?
Yes.
Like in my head.
Yeah.
Well, it was a BOGO. and we are better off because of it.
Definitely.
But what sparked? Now let's go back. What sparked your interest in leadership?
Yeah, that's a good question. My first boss at that church, I was the children's worship pastor. He started investing in me personally very early on,
Mm-hmm.
and my first day on staff at the church, we had this big event, and the entertainment that we had for the event canceled. And so on that day, they said, Jesse, you're going to get up and you need to do 30 minutes of entertainment for everyone.
Shtick.
I was like, okay. And so I did, and we had served dinner and there were enchiladas, and I think I had said some interesting comment about the enchiladas and something about it that day that probably wasn't the most savvy thing to say at the time. And so my boss came into my office the next day, and he was just like, hey, Jesse, what does the word discernment mean? And I was like, I'm starting to say an answer, and he's like, hey, do you have a dictionary? Look it up. I was like, okay. I figured he was working on a message, something. Yeah. And so I looked it up, and he's like, read it. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So I read it, and he's like, that's your word. He's like, everything you do and say, think about that. And that stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
It still sticks with me. I try it. Yeah, I fail often, but it still sticks with me. And from that moment, I said, I want to do that. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what leadership development looked like.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still my mentor to this day. That same person. And so from then on, I was wanting to do leadership development.
So I have a whole bunch of thoughts on things about leadership. And I think it's very similar to discipleship. If you ask somebody, what is discipleship? There are going to be 100 different answers out of 100 different people. What is good leadership? It'll be 100 different answers for 100 different people. But what are some signs of a good leader that you have seen over the years and you have developed in yourself and have played out in the lives of other people because you have been leading them?
I think for me, and the biggest thing that I've seen, and I think the biggest thing that's been the most effective for me has been listening. To be able to genuinely listen to people, ask a question, and not just wait to give your opinion and your advice on how they should change. Because most people you come and talk to, especially when it comes, and this is in my family as well, and it's played out with my wife. People come to you, they have a situation, they have a problem, they have something, and not all the time do they want it fixed. Sometimes they just want you to listen. Mm-hmm. But building trust with them enough to listen and show that you listen and you genuinely care about them, then gives you the opportunity to help speak into their lives and to help develop them in that way. But the number one thing is to listen.
Mm-hmm. How has your personal leadership evolved over the years? What are some specific things that maybe your mentor has shown you that somebody listening to this podcast can go, oh, wow, that's applicable in my life. I can use that.
Yeah. In my personal life, it's definitely been the biggest thing is just discipline. Being disciplined and doing the things that it takes to get to where I'm pushing to be, or my mentor is pushing me to be. But then in my ministry, it's the leadership has changed drastically. When I first started out in ministry, in children's ministry, student ministry, we always needed volunteers. We need volunteers all the time. Yeah. And so you pray, God, please give me 750 volunteers and make 700 of them men. Right? And so I would always, but most of my time was spent with kids and students. Mm-hmm. I would say 80% of my time was spent with kids and students. Mm-hmm. And then there was this pivotal shift in my last probably 3 years of student ministry, that I don't know what the shift was, but I said, if I'm going to develop leaders and people and families, then I have to spend more time where the leaders are. Mm-hmm. If I want leaders, where are the leaders? And those are the parents. And so the last 3 years of my ministry, I completely switched and did 80% of my time with parents and 20% with students.
Yeah.
And for 3 years, I did not lack leaders. Mm-hmm. It was such a blessing. Like, parents, once you get into, who they are, their giftedness, where they fit, it's so easy to plug them in at that point.
Yeah. Pastor Jason, since I've known you, leadership development has been a core value here at Revolution, but also in church world.
Mm-hmm.
So 90% of the conferences we've gone to in the last 8-9 years have been leadership development oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So as a great leader of our church, how have you developed in that skill?
Yeah, that's interesting. Good leader, maybe. Great is, I feel like we use that word too much, but I appreciate that. Leadership, it was, there's a lot, you said, like listen, read. There's a lot of things I could say, about a skill, but leadership at the end of the day is all about the future. It was Marcus Buckingham, and I can't remember the title of the book, but it was he talked about the difference between management and leadership. Leadership is all about a preferred future. Like this is where I feel like God wants us to go, or just feel like if you're not a believer, we need to go, and then getting people from here to there. So leadership is by definition a visionary thing. Like you have to be able to think about the future. Hey, I want to go there. So I do think when we think of leadership, I think so much people like, I don't know how to do that. It's like, well, do you have an idea of a vision for the future of what you would want? And then it's about building a team to get there. So the reason I'm saying that is part of leadership is having a sense of like something needs to be different. And then having a sense of what that could be, and then leading or trying to get there. And so the best thing that developed me as a leader is leading, is doing it, is because, especially in seminary, in similar way, I started off as an intern, and I would be given, I actually struggled in ministry very early because so much of, especially in more, established churches, so much of my ministry, so much of my job was managing. Take these kids on this trip, so it's about managing in details. And I'm not good at that. So very early on in ministry, I wrestled and struggled so much because it was like, if my job is like planning a ski trip for kids, or like I was at a very established church that was already large. And so it was basically like, hey, manage this ministry. I did not like it, and I struggled. But then I left there. I mean, I worked, I tried, I worked really hard, tried to be disciplined, all those things. But when I left there, I went to a church plant where I was the very first student pastor. Our church was, I think, 7 or 8 years old when I got there. I was the very first one, and I had to build a ministry from scratch. Well, I excelled there because I didn't have this thing I was managing. They were like, we didn't have any students. We had like 20 students. And my pastor was like, hey, grow it to 100 and take them to camp. That was my goal. I'm like, you're just going to set me free and do it. So that's where my leadership really came out of like having an idea of what this could be like, and then building a team to realize it, So to answer your question, like it was actually putting into practice like, skills like that, like listening, but then having a sense, an innate sense. A leader is going to be the one who looks around and thinks, man, something needs to be different. As someone said, a leader solves a problem before anybody else knows their problems. So I think innate in leadership is, and this is where we all can learn to do this in our life at different levels. Leadership is about looking around and saying, man, something needs to be different. And then having a vision. And then, aspiring people that this is what we could do, and then building a team to get that,
At what point did the light bulb go off for both of you guys that everybody's a leader? We start out by leading self.
I think for me is in that time with my boss at that first job, when he was pretty explicit in that and telling me that, and I didn't have to figure that out for myself. He told me.
Yeah.
And so, when he did say that, he's like, every person is a leader. Like you're leading no matter what you're leading. And you're leading yourself somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's always been in my mind since then. You?
Yeah, that's, it's like, we're all a sum total of like all of our experiences in life. So to go back and look at like when that was or how it's hard to like
because
it's just
it became a core level of our leadership pathway.
Ingredient of what we do. I think I mean, it's definitely the same kind of way. Like as I started leading in ministry, because again, church leadership is unique. It's similar in some ways, but it's different in others, because church leadership, at least how it's traditionally understood in the church world, is so much about spiritual authority and even discipleship. You know what I mean? Like everybody knows we need to make disciples and you need to preach the word, but no one talks to you about how to do that. You know?
Yep.
So I became in college, I became obsessed with leadership, and that's when reading every leadership book. Of course, John Maxwell's the guy.
Good to Great, though.
Yeah, Good to Great. Yeah, so many books like that I just started devouring. And as I was doing that, that's when I realized, oh, I am leading myself now. And again, if I have a future, a preferred future that I want to go after, and I want to ask people to go there with me,
Right.
well, inherent in that is like, well, they're going to follow me. So if they're going to follow me, I better make sure I'm worth following. You know,
It's good.
and I think that's where the concept of leading yourself comes in. Because if I'm going to be a leader, and I think I've said this. In fact, I think we talked about this at the conference last week at Exponential. I've always explained myself and understood myself as a reluctant leader. Like I'm not this huge type A personality guy that when I go in the room, I'm going to suck all the oxygen out. And and what I mean by that, and I hope that I don't mean that to sound arrogant. I hope that sounds humble, but I have just found God just keeps putting me in leadership positions. Whether it was in sports, I would always be the team captain. But I'm not always the loudest, most obnoxious person. Like that's what we think of leaders. Is we think of leaders as the girl or the guy who speaks up, who has the answer. No, what I have found a lot of times, those people are just loud, annoying people. Like they're not necessarily leaders.
Servant leadership.
Yeah, it's servant leadership.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Robert Greenleaf,
what it is.
the former AT&T exec.
Yeah.
He wrote the book, Servant Leadership, which apparently he stole from Jesus.
Yes. We all get it from Jesus.
But that is the most attractive thing, I think, in our culture today that some people are aware of, and some people aren't even aware that they're attracted to that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the Chick-fil-A culture.
Yeah.
There's a reason why their sales are higher than McDonald's with, a small percentage of the properties.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I was going with that is like, and I'm glad you said that phrase. Because I would find myself in these leadership positions, and the reason why, and I was almost always other people would put me there. I didn't ask to be there, but the reason why my friends and peers would put me there is because I would just care about them. I would just listen to them, like you were talking about. I would just serve them, and then like in high school in football, I was voted by all my peers to be the football captain. I didn't put my name in there. I didn't ask to do it. And when they voted me, I was like, oh gosh, like what does that mean for me? Now. So I've always just been in those kind of places, but that's when you start to realize, I think God does gift people with leadership. And then you start feeling responsible for people. But it does start with, I think your point as I'm here to serve people.
Yes.
I want to serve people and I want to love people. And if you do that, then you'll earn the right to lead them. And then I think God will put we didn't come up with this phrase either, but that holy discontent in your heart. That for me, like the whole reason why I wanted to start plant a church is because when I was in high school, I went to an East Texas Southern Baptist small little church. We had a gym that was awesome, and I'd invite my friends, the students, but I did not want them to come to church with me on Sunday. Like we had youth group on Wednesday nights, but they wouldn't want to come to church on Sundays. So I just remember thinking then, man, I want to lead a church that my friends would come to. So that's where that holy discontent came in of like, I love people. I want them to know Jesus, but they don't like this church. And so how can we do this differently? And that's where that desire started coming. And then, so I started reading leadership. But at the end of the day, if you don't want to serve people, if you don't want to love people, leadership is the last thing you should be involved in.
Yeah. What is the phrase? If serving is beneath you, leadership is beyond you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great thing.
And you have made that so clear with our staff and with our church. It's even in our stewardship class, the inverted pyramid.
Yes.
Could you explain that?
Me?
Yes.
Sorry. Come on, Jesse.
Or either one. I don't care. I have no preference.
Yeah, I mean, at our culture now, sadly, I think has been. How do I say this? I don't want to say infected, but the idea in our culture is like all authority is bad. And so it's kind of there's a mindset of like just improper power dynamics, which there is a place for that, because definitely people in power have abused their power. They haven't used their power for the good of others. They've used their power. In fact, we did a series many years ago, which maybe you need to go back and watch now that you're here. I don't even know if it's on the website, called Ants. And I talked about the difference between being a tyrant and a servant, A-N-T, the ant. And so it was like, which ant are you? So a tyrant at the end of the day says they are here to serve me, but a servant says I'm here to serve them. Mm-hmm. So Jesus as our model, Jesus, the greatest leaders ever lived. The movement he leads, called the church, is the most successful movement on the face of the planet. He said he would build it. He's still building it. So when it comes to that, like when you think about it from that perspective, leading in, and I just lost my train of thought. I'm trying to, how you keep talking to try to get the pyramid. That's what we're talking about. Okay. Jesus flips it. Jesus says, whoever wants to be great must be your servant. So the problem is not power. The problem is just where the power positions itself. To where I think people in our culture think all authority is bad, which is funny. The people who think that want to be an authority to tell us. So the problem is not power. The problem is, do I use my power from beneath to build up? Mm-hmm. So yeah, we used to call it back in student ministry, the pyramid of love. It kind of felt weird. So we call it now the empowerment pyramid.
Thank you.
I appreciate that change of name.
Well, the reason was because our student ministry back then, our mission statement was to love and challenge students to follow Christ. And so the point was, in order to challenge them, we have to love them. Mm-hmm. I have to earn the right to challenge them.
Yes.
But if I love them, I will challenge them. So for our leaders, I would always tell them, we had the pyramid of love, like you're on the bottom. So it was our staff, and then it was our coaches, and then our team leaders, and then our students. We just took the same thing for here, to where at our church, at the top of the pyramid is the people that we're serving. At the bottom is our staff. Now, clearly our staff have an inordinate amount of authority. And that's, the elders in the church, that's biblical. Mm-hmm. But so I should retain that authority, or our pastors and board should retain that authority, but we should empower people with it to serve. And I think as long as that's the key, like it's not inverted the other, like a normal pyramid where the leaders are at the top, they have all the authority and all the power, and then they can abuse it. Totally understand that. But if it's inverted the way we use, and we are using it to empower people, then it's godly, it's honoring. So that's what it is.
Excellent. I can't believe we are running out of time today. But I have two quick questions for Pastor Jesse. In the workplace, is there a leadership skill that is lacking, or most important? What skill or is undervalued? What skill set do you believe is undervalued in the workplace that somebody listening might go, oh, okay, we don't have that?
I don't want to sound like a broken record at all, but I really, truly believe that it's listening. And I know I said it a minute ago, but the one that's mainly lacking, because most people in the workplace, they want their voice to be heard, because if they're not heard traditionally, they don't get promoted. They don't get to the next level. They don't have the resources that they need. But truly being able to listen, if you are a leader of people, if you have people underneath you, listening to the needs of the people that are underneath you and what they need to do their jobs. Because a lot of times as leaders, we're seeing things from above and we're like, oh, they need this, this, and this, but it's not what they need to be effective in their job. So being able to truly ask the questions, to listen, to see what the people need.
And that's not just for the workplace. That's every relationship that you have.
Everyone.
And if you're not meeting somebody's needs, maybe you haven't listened to what their needs are.
Yep.
So that's great. So if somebody listening right now wants to implement a leadership skill, would that be the one that you would say, go with that one?
Absolutely. I would say go have a conversation with the people that you work with. And I mean, I do this with my kids.
Or your family.
Or your family. I do this with my kids. And I just did it last week with my son. I say, hey, what is it that I ask the question, what is it that I need to do better as a dad, as a husband, and as to be able to love you better and just to love you where you are? What do I need to do? And so I think I like to do that in the workplace as well. Like, what can I do as a leader that would help you do your job? And that's the number one thing I would say to go do right now.
With everyone in your life.
Everyone in your life.
Your life will go better if you do that.
Yeah.
Well, we are so I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, just to piggyback off of that, like, that is the key, I think, to servant leadership. You know, if like we said with the pyramid of empowerment, if I'm here for you to serve you, then I'm going to serve you in the way you need to be served, you know? And that's where, again, Ken Blanchard, we talked about him off air, so that's why I keep looking at you and I say it. But one of the books I read in seminary was Leadership in the 1 Minute Manager. And the concept he talks about there is situational leadership. Right. To where, and that was a news flash for me as a leader, like, because leadership is almost, again, it's about the future. Like, here's where we're going, but I can't start where I'm not. Yeah, I want to get there, but I got to start where I am. So what situational leadership says is I'm going to go to people I'm leading, whether it be my kids, my family, people in the workforce, and say, that's where I feel like we need to go. But I need to listen to, but what do you need in order to get there? How can I help you?
It's what do you want?
Yeah, what do you want?
And part of that building relationship. And that's one of the things that I do. I try and do. I set 30 minutes every day to have informal conversations with people, just to get to know them and hang out with them as part of my normal routine.
Yeah.
Because that's when you realize, oh, they need this, and they're never going to say that in a formal meeting.
And I can attest to that. You're great at that. Highly relational.
Yeah.
So we're excited you're here. Excited to see you help us grow as a church, and excited to walk alongside with you.
Excited to be here.
Okay.
Yeah, as Jesse said, the only bad thing is we both wish we would have hired him about 7 years ago.
That's right. That's exactly right.
7 years from now, we won't have to say that.
That's right.
Yeah.
You've been binge listening the podcast.
I have.
So you know what happens at the end.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. I know.
Super exciting.
You're seeing it live for the first
can't
time.
wait.
Okay.
Participating in it.
Our producer is Brian Damerow. Our video technician is the king, Keon Sidigi. Our key grip is Jakub Pushakowski. Our film director, Marcos Guardiola.
You can say that. You speak Spanish. You say it. Yes.
Yes.
I can.
Yeah.
Guardiola.
Thank
There you
you.
go. Yeah.
Our head of doctrine and theology is theologian. Our chief evangelist is salvation.
Did you have something else with that? Or
No, nothing. Our backsliding prevention officer is lukewarm. Did you laugh the first time you heard these?
Oh, that's what you're expecting him to laugh.
Oh,
I thought you were having like a coordinate event.
with that pause for laughter.
I felt like I just put my window down.
Sorry, the applause sign didn't pop up.
Come on.
Our director of Swedish witnessing is Bjorn again. Bjorn. Now stop it. Stop it. That's not funny.
That is my favorite one, though. So that was perfect.
Our expert on Russian eschatology is Pitov Hell. Our director of holiness is mortification. Our staff counselor is Les Moody. Our giving coordinator, generosity. Our director of tithing is 10%. 10%. Our activity coordinator, she's from France, Beth Lechem.
Does it sound like she's from France? More would that be Hebrew? Sounds like Hebrew.
Beth,
Yeah.
It's a combination. Lehem, Bethlehem. Co-pastors of plagues, Manny Locusts and Lance Boyles. Our Scottish eschatology professor, as we are planting in Scotland, is Mark O. the Beast. Our director of communication is Bernie Bush. Our director of doctrine of election is I Am Chosen. Our sabbatical director, Trip Long. Our missional expert, Sam Aria. Our resident Trinitarian is Holly Spear. I do this just for me, people. This is just for me.
He's just nodding again.
Yes.
He didn't remember.
Our strategist for the final battle is Irma Geddon. Our resident prayer warrior is Neil Down. Our executive director of spiritual warfare is Demonic. Our staff golf pro, who always loses his ball in the tree, is Jack Nicodemus.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. Our church growth strategist is Momentum.
Mo's my boy.
Yeah. Our head of our new AI initiative is Artificial. Our director of Old Testament
I'm laughing.
Yeah,
our
that's
director of Old Covenant, Old Testament Covenants, Sir Circumcised. He was knighted. Our video technician in charge. Our video technician in charge of instant replay, Slow Moses. And this is a deep dive, timely. I'm very proud of this one. Our new name. You know, we have a storage problem here at Revolution.
We do. Yeah.
Pastor Jason, it's always a point of contention here. We don't have any storage. Our chief strategist for storage, we just hired him. You know him from Ezra a little bit, and definitely from Esther. King Ahasha Warehouse. Ahasha Warehouse. For all of my people that have just celebrated the festival of Purim, we either dressed up as King Ahasuerus or Mordecai, because Purim is like Halloween for Jewish kids.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so every girl dressed up as Esther.
Yeah.
Nobody dressed up as Haman because he was the bad guy.
Yeah.
But it was Mordecai or King Ahasuerus.
Is this real? You really did this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The festival of Purim.
Yeah, it just happened.
Happened in all synagogues.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so much and there's a pastry called a Hamantaschen named after Haman. It is a triangular, because he wore a triangular hat. It is a triangular pastry filled with wonderful things.
Wonderful things.
Absolutely. If you go to the Jerusalem Bakery this week in Roswell, they will have Hamantaschen.
Yeah. All right.
Any hoodles. We've added something to the final saying. The king has one more move, so
trust God and take a nap.
Boom.
See you next time.